have such sights to show you.
We're Poppin the Scary horror podcast. I'm your host Coale, and with me as always, I have my good friend and co-host Aaron.
Hello.
Hello. Howdy, bud. How's this going?
Pretty good, man. I'm ready to arrive at our final destination.
Oh, damn, you remembered. Look at you go. Gold stars across the board. Just
I remember what movie we're watching for the podcast.
Hell yeah.
Bare
All
minimum.
right, so obviously you've known about this franchise and everything else, but have you ever seen any of the films?
Oh, I've seen much more marketing for the films than I've seen of actually content in the film.
Yeah. So, tell me your experience growing up, because the first film came out about 2000 and everything else and everything. So, obviously, we were, young kids at the time and everything else. What was your experience hearing about the Final Destination films, just in pop culture and everything else like that?
It just seemed like one of those, pop culture horror franchises that kind of took off because it had a unique sort of horror spin, horror plot point of, from what I gather from the marketing materials, it's like just death comes to these people in wacky, accidental ways. Not wacky, and I don't think they're going for wacky necessarily, but logs flying off the back of a truck, or the roller coaster stops and you get struck by lightning. I don't fucking know. Just random shit from what I gather from the commercials is you're trying to, these people are doomed to death, and yet they try to avoid it. I don't even know if that's 100% accurate, but that's seeing the marketing and stuff growing up. It was like a novel concept. It kind of honestly like The Purge. I hadn't seen The Purge yet, but what caught on about The Purge is that's a neat concept. One day where crime is legal, and then they made 4 million of them. They do the same. Saw was the same way for me growing up, where I was like, yes, I understand the concept of this, but I've never seen the movies. And then they made 10 of them, where it's yes, there's a guy that traps people in a room. And yeah, so I was like, okay, this seems like one of those neat concepts that people really latched onto, and then they made 4 million of them. I don't know what they're on now, but they just released a new one in theaters, right?
Yes, I believe it's the sixth installment, which is pretty impressive that there wasn't more in the span of 25 years and everything else. Considering a lot of horror is known for coming out with horrors year after year, Saw,
summer.
Saw being one of the most famous examples and everything else like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty much same boat as you, because growing up and everything else, I would hear bits and pieces about Final Destination, which for me, because there wasn't a face or icon or slasher, let's just be realistic, that wasn't attached to it.
Yeah.
My curiosity waned a little bit, because
there's not a villain face of the franchise.
Yes, exactly. And being someone that's always been curious by villains, be it from Disney or horror or anything else like that, just hearing the idea of oh man, you just die in freaky ways and everything. I'm surprised it didn't really have as big of a grip, especially whenever I got to my teenage years, because one of the shows that I remember is, I don't even remember it, it's I think it was on Spike TV, MTV, but it's it's probably Spike TV, who am I kidding, but it's 1,000 Ways to Die and everything, I remember watching it at the time, and just being able to be so desensitized to the idea that literally these people actually died from these horrific freak accidents and everything else like that. But obviously, with this film, I think you're on the right idea, that I think the reason why it latched on to pop culture is just sort of the idea that, realistically, there are millions of ways that people can be killed. It just takes a certain sequence of events to occur and everything else like that. And I mean, obviously, most folks, I mean, they know about some of the more infamous ones and everything else, the logs on the back of the truck and everything else. Or, there's I remember the third one freaked me out a little bit, seeing it, because it's showing them on a roller coaster. And that's about as much as I know and everything else, because I have never seen any of these films. It's one of those films that my wife was like, oh, you should watch it, it's super fun and everything, but I just never got around to it. No good reason or anything whatsoever. I just hadn't got around to it. So I figured with the sixth installment coming out this year and everything else, I felt like it was just time to actually go back and visit the first film, just to kind of see how we overall feel about it and everything else, and see how it's aged after 25 years, which is crazy to think about, and everything, it coming out that long ago and everything else. Is there any sort of expectations you have going into this film? Like, would you say, the bar's heightened a little bit given the notoriety of the franchise? Or are you coming at it from a cool standpoint, knowing it's the first entry, first one to come out on the scene and everything else like that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the cool entry side. I don't, not the. I guess I don't have any expectations one way or another. I think it's going to be a perfectly average film, if I had to guess. But, so I will be pleasantly surprised if it's pretty good, and I won't be that disappointed if it's shit. But, I guess I would be surprised because they made 6 of them. I think the first one has to be, like, at least decent. So, I think decent's the bar for me. Anything lower than that, I'm going to be a little disappointed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's totally fair. Horror, it's interesting with horror and everything else, because obviously a lot of times you hear, like, the first one's good, but as you continue on, it just continues to degrade. But I think that's the idea with most sequels.
Right.
But obviously there's always, like, that exception where it gets better as the series continues on. So I'm also kind of with you, where I'm not trying to hype it up too much to expect to be like, whoa, mind blown and everything else like that. But at the same point, I'm not going to give it easy passes or whatever. I'm definitely going to try to come at it from a middling standpoint. Like, okay, you're the one that kicked off this whole franchise and everything else. Obviously, there was enough magic there going on to spawn off 5 more sequels and everything else. So I'm curious on whether this is going to be a franchise that will intrigue me to check out the further entries, or will kind of leave me just kind of meh overall and everything. So I guess there's only way to find out, and that's to head to our final destination.
Hell yeah.
I just stole the joke you did before and everything else like that, but we will be right back, folks. And we are back from watching Final Destination.
Final D.
Yeah. So, how was that for our Final Destination?
Yeah, that was good. I guess kind of met my expectations of what I learned about it from the marketing trailers, but I did enjoy watching some Rube Goldberg machine-ass deaths with you.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. It was one of those things where it was pretty mundane for a lot of it, and then it would just be a Looney Tunes cartoon.
Yes.
For a brief period of time, so that was a little wild to see at the very least and everything. So
I also love the theme of plane-based horrors immediately before 9/11 when this movie came out. In a movie about predicting the deaths of terrible deaths of people, he predicted 9/11 before it happened, and he got off the plane. Happy for him.
What is it about horror films predicting 9/11 like this and Saw?
I know, yeah. Didn't Saw come out afterwards? So, why did they choose that as the date on the cell phone?
I'm trying to remember when Saw came out.
Just strangely predictive.
I think it was... Oh, it came out in 2004.
Yeah,
okay, that's what it was.
Yeah,
yes.
so Saw's was a callback.
Yeah, that was a callback. This one
Y'all
literally
9/11?
predicted the future and everything.
You said you'd never forget. Y'all remember this one?
Holy hell. I would say I'm pretty much on board with Aaron's thoughts as well.
On board the plane. Hey, it's just an average Boeing flight experience, honestly. They did say it was a 747.
Oh my god.
So they predicted that too.
I think we're going to be stuck on the plane for the entire review.
It is at the beginning of the movie, so that's the safe one I can talk about.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, that's the opener,
explosion.
that's like what initially kicks it off and everything. It was definitely... I don't know about you, but for me, watching the film, it definitely had a lot of first horror installment vibes.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, with the way they prefaced the beginning, it made it seem like we all knew what the premise was before it even told us what the premise was.
True. Yeah, I actually really liked how this movie layered in clues and foreshadowing in both obvious and, like, in the background kind of ways. There's a lot of, like, numbers appearing that are significant and things, and it's woven into the plot and the dialogue of the movie to a certain extent. Like, before he gets on the plane, the flight attendant lady is like, your birthday and the flight number are the same or whatever. So it's got some fucking, like, Da Vinci Code ass shit where, like, oh, these things line up. It's like a conspiracy theorist movie almost, except for, unlike real conspiracy theories, he's pretty good at predicting what's actually gonna happen.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it definitely, the main pull of it is definitely strong in this one there. So I guess the only way to kind of talk even more about these crazy points is by diving into the overall premise and everything, which focuses on our central character Alex, who is basically getting ready to go on a high school trip to France and everything.
Paris.
But on the way there, he ends up getting a premonition about the plane exploding and everything else, and decides to freak out realistically and want to get off. And after some students get off the plane and everything, the premonition kind of happens and everything else, and then they're all left having to deal with the wake of barely surviving death, not really realizing that death's not done with them.
Not done yet.
Death's not going to be cheated like that, and is going to go on their own little hunt to make sure those that need to die do. So yeah, I mean, we talked about this in our overall thoughts on the franchise, because we knew what the overall gist of the franchise was and everything else, with the idea about, like, death coming for them in the most unexpected ways and everything else like that. And so obviously, kind of like you mentioned, Aaron, similar to The Purge, it's just a neat concept. Like, just the fact that, with human life in general and everything, like the human resilience to live and everything and just avoid something that could just kill you is a wondrous idea. So I think them turning it into a film idea and everything makes total sense and everything else like that. And just kind of personifying death as one to not easily let go of people that were supposed to die and everything. I like that idea of an antagonist and everything.
Right.
So,
and if I can get overly academic here for a second,
Absolutely.
I really like how, I mean, coming into the 2000s, I feel like there's a lot of unique, more meta horror movies, and I would lump this in this category where it really dissects. Like, there's most horror movies before this time, I feel like there was a bad guy or a force of bad guys, if it was like zombies or something, or a slasher or like something. But this is like really just the concept of death itself is the villain, which is kind of crazy. I think, a lot of movies going forward, whether it's Scream or whether it, like, they play with the concept of what horror is a lot in these 2000s horror movies is what I'm picking up on. And it has a little more creativity from that angle. So I like that I both like, and I do think it does a disservice that there's not like a face to the bad guy in this movie. You don't see the Grim Reaper or some shit like death's coming for you. But it's it's like just the force, the concept of death itself is a little bit more of an evolution behind just like there's a guy with a knife trying to kill you.
Yeah, and I think we'll definitely talk more about the personification of death as we continue on, especially in, well, it's tricky to talk about, I guess, for light spoilers, because, I mean, we've already kind of lightly spoiled the beginning of the film, because that's what kicks it off. There is actually a personification. You just didn't know about it. I only knew...
The little shadow? Or are you talking about...
an
The
actual
mortician guy. Okay, because I picked up on that. Yeah.
yes. That is
He literally comes out of like this hell hole in the side.
Exactly.
And he's like,
So,
I'll see you soon.
but yes, no, yeah. But I'm picking up what you're putting down
Yes.
because mostly it sticks with the shadow. But whenever people choose a face to represent death and everything, it's Tony Todd who appears in this film and everything. Unfortunately, only for a brief glimpse and everything. But obviously, we'll talk more about it in characters. But I do agree with you. It's definitely kind of cool as an idea, but also kind of does take away more of the like fun of horror and everything whenever it comes to the hunter finding their prey and everything.
Yeah, it's a lot more abstract of a movie in general.
Yeah, so I'm glad you picked that up. It was one of those things I was thinking. I was like, did he miss that whole thing? I felt like the puns were definitely heavy.
But he's like not there at the scene killing people. You know what I mean?
Yes,
he just shows up and alludes to the fact of being this force.
Yes, and I totally picked that up as soon as you were talking. Like, oh, you're talking about like just the fact that it's like a wave shadow thing and everything else.
It would be like if in Friday the 13th, Jason only appears in one scene and he's like, "You're gonna die," and then all the campers die by tripping over fucking rocks and drowning in the lake. But you never see Jason. You know,
that is true.
It would be a different movie.
Yeah, it definitely I think could have done more to at least like because I thought it would be one of those things like you know how you like. I don't know if I'm just totally coming up with a bunch of garbage that isn't actually a thing people say, but like seeing the face of death or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I wish they would have played more with that or whatever. Just like, you know, get a glimpse of like Tony in the crowd or something.
Oh, yeah.
And I know they would try to do that at least with the shadow waves or the wind and everything, which I think is cool artistically, but
they did it again in an abstract way. I think a lot of times before the death scenes happen, those significant numbers pop up. So like as he boards the plane, not only is there a lot of like number based shit, like when he wakes up, his alarm clock skips from 1 o'clock to 180. And then that's the flight number, and then that, and it's all this like random shit. But also like when he's stepping onto the plane and he's looking through the crack between the plane and the little boarding terminal thing, and that little car drives underneath. It says 666 on the top, and then he drives it. So they do little things like death is about to happen, you know, like even I mean I don't want to spoil any of the other death scenes, but that you will see flashes not only of like premonitions of what is about to kill them, but like these numbers will start to pop up in the background and stuff. So I guess that's kind of like the face of death, or like some hint of foreshadowing of death. But yeah, no, I totally agree. There's no like he's not there. The character Tony's not chilling in the audience, right? At least I didn't spot him. But
I only ever saw him in that one scene there, which I guess that's like the thing as the series continues on and everything, they might utilize him a little bit more maybe, but I still imagine that they try to make it look like a freak accident because that's just death and everything. It's just having this crazy stuff happen and everything else to the point where it defies normal like life rules like gravity or any sort of thing like that. Like death is pulling all the strings whenever it comes to the function of the world.
Yeah, like when you're destined to die, you're gonna die.
Yeah, so it's definitely fun watching it. I will say I was very surprised whenever I mean, I guess we could talk about story pacing later, but I was just very surprised that for how notorious it was and everything for like, oh yeah, freaky death happens and everything. There was a lot of like, okay, I guess we're just chilling here right now and everything. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, and there's some in between for sure. Yeah.
But, you know, not necessarily bad, but just definitely was like, okay. But yeah, I mean, I guess since we got general kind of plot pacing out of the way and everything, we could talk about some of the characters, which probably characters
games.
Downloads. I'm so glad I picked up on that. Oh my god. And obviously we could talk about the leading man, Alex Browning, played by Devin Sawa. I'm gonna be completely honest. His whole role is to be sort of exposition guy.
Sure, yeah.
And everything. I feel like I didn't get a lot from him character-wise, besides he's just trying to do his best and he's stressed out.
Yeah.
And it's obviously, I don't really blame the actor per se, but also his performance wasn't endearing enough for me to grab it. It was just more so I was like listening to him like, okay, what important like lore drop is he going to get, or exposition thing is going to happen. And so that, I feel like, just kind of does hurt the film a little bit, that I feel like really, and this is my humble opinion, the main group of characters are pretty okay. Like they're pretty just average. I didn't really cling on to any one of them. Like, I thought I was going to cling on to the leading gal and everything, but after the first like bit, she just kind of literally just becomes like supporting exposition for exposition man, and I was just like, okay, there goes a bit of spunk personality and everything else. And again, like, they have very very loose tags on who they are to kind of identify it, because usually I'm used to like Friday the 13th where they amp up the factors. They're like, you are all this, as opposed to, for the most part, it's just like, okay, this guy is just trying to do his best, and then he has his good pal who's just always like, hey, let's take a shit together or whatever, doing that. Or you have like guy who's always like getting antagonistic, always being a bully,
the big bully guy,
yes, and his side girl and everything else. And then you have the big dopey guy running around, and then you have like the outcast girl who ends up becoming a romantic interest in the main guy. Like, it's seen a mile away, and everything else.
They are pretty caricature characters.
Yeah, and it wasn't unbearable to watch them or anything else like that, but it was just like, okay, just keep rocking forward and everything else like that. And so
nobody really had that riz.
No riz to be had at all whatsoever. It was just, I think the thing that just made the films, like some of the characters, endearing is just due to the cinematography. Like, I have not seen so many artistic shit shots they have done.
True. Dude, they did a pan with the double shit shot. First off, they split the screen in half with the divider of the shit stall, which is awesome. But then they did this sick spiral pan that emulates like a turd getting flushed down the toilet. To pan to the main character. And it's the little details like that I actually really appreciate about this movie, because I know they did that shit on purpose. They could have just easily done a woo, but they did a little spiral woo, for the toilet shit shot. And that was just the first of a couple shit shots. The more shit shots than I thought would be in this movie.
Oh my god. Yeah, it's just so goofy, which I think if it wasn't for that, I think it would definitely cause the film to suffer more, because it just does a lot of weird artistic stuff at random points.
It is a little avant-garde of a movie, despite it being this like big well-known franchise that I associated with today. I mean, I feel like they took some risks with even just the concept of like, there's no bad guy, it's just like they're dying and they gotta avoid this shadow that sometimes kills them.
I would definitely appreciate that about the cinematography. It's so funny, we have nothing to say really about the majority of the characters. Are like, cinematography's good.
Right? Yeah, let's skip. Yeah, honestly, but I will say I appreciate about the main character is that he's like the only teenager in this movie, or like any movie I've seen, that has some like acne, some facial scarring.
I was surprised with that. They didn't just make him like, I'm just a weird, misunderstood
He actually
guy. He
looked
does
a little more like a teenager than most of the... but I can't say that they even did that across the cast, because you made a comment when we were first watching, when they're first in the airport, how hard it is to tell the difference between the teachers and the kids. Because they're all just like 20-somethings.
Yeah, I was genuinely like, there was one moment where, it's like, you have like, clearly the older gentleman speaking French, you're like, okay, he's clearly,
he's the teacher,
literally that. But then you find this other like younger looking actress, trying to pull the student away. And it's just like, is she a teacher? I guess she literally looks the exact same age as everyone else. Oh my god. But yeah, so I will give kudos there. I do feel like, I did believe him to be the weird Miss Outcast thing, as opposed to whenever they put somebody that's just dadgum handsome in the role, and they're like, I'm so misunderstood, and it's just like, yeah, I'm sure you are.
Right.
But yeah, let's jump over to another character. This character, I thought I was going to be like, oh yeah, I'm all about this character, because they kind of personified her at the beginning as, you know, definitely different, weird outcast, but literally it just kind of degraded into nothing, which I blame that on writing and everything. But it's Ali Larder, who plays Clear Rivers. I just
didn't know that was her full name.
no, I had no idea what it was besides like love interest.
Right.
Because spoiler alert, that's just what it boils down to and everything. But if
They
you couldn't
hint at
tell
it
from the
pretty early.
beginning, like literally, doom.
If you've ever seen a movie before, you probably pieced that what was coming.
And it's just so bad because, like, I appreciated just kind of, like, how she initially just had, like, that sort of, like, instinct reaction of, like, there's just something about you that I cling to or whatever. I'm like, oh, man, that's kind of interesting. And, you know, she's kind of, like, very artsy and just kind of, you can definitely tell she's a bit of an outcast or whatever. But as it just continues on, her character arc just sort of degrades into just, like, okay, just she's the love interest taking care of Exposition Boy and helps add to Exposition Boy's, you know, monologuing, theory crafting and everything.
Which is funny because I feel like she has development in there somewhere. It's just like in the background details. It's like she does this weird metalworking shit and it's just like I don't know, it's the scene for a lot of scenes, but is never really I don't know. There's a few times where they try to characterize her and I'm like, that's cool, but then her actual character is just kind of like pretty straightforward, and I don't know how to describe what I'm trying to describe, but it feels like there's shit in the background where if you like read a book version of this, then they would have all kinds of descriptions of her weird metalworking sculpture shit and how she's an orphan apparently and like all this, but they just kind of like sneak in those details and they're like, okay, whatever. They keep going on.
Yeah, it's weird because like they have a big moment with her character where she gives like this big backstory, you know, as to why she's in the situation that she is, and it should feel like a big revolutionary breaking moment, especially whenever they try shoving the theme in, but I just felt like it was just poorly executed.
Yeah, it felt like it didn't matter at all. So
we
were just like listening to this characterization of someone at like the end of the movie and you're like, okay.
it just felt like there was no way to it and everything, which again, like I'm not expecting, you know, just brilliant sort of like, you know, oh my gosh, such rich character development. But at the same point, it just feels like a sad attempt of just like, it's like, there's the character development.
And we were like, okay.
Okay, well, neat.
What's next?
So she was definitely a bit of a letdown, but I don't blame the actress entirely. I think that's just script problems overall and everything.
Right.
So rip in peace that character development. The next one, at least IMDb is telling me, is to talk about Carter Horton, played by Kerr Smith, which looking at the IMDb profile, I was like, I've seen this face before. And I remember he was in My Bloody Valentine remake as Axel, the one that's the sheriff and everything, who's like having that affair and everything. I know it's been a hot minute.
Yeah, it's been too long since I've seen that movie. I don't remember any of those characters.
You're good. He was the one that was in opposition to Jensen Ackles and everything, because Jensen Ackles comes back to town and everything. And Kerr Smith. You're good. You're good. I know I remember more of it because I like the movie a ton. I've seen it a couple of times.
I
so
have
you're good.
Memory. Anything that happened 2 years ago or more.
Yes, you're good. But anyways, in this film, I would argue he's playing basically the same douchey character, except he has even less motive for being just douchey. He just genuinely hates the main character.
Yeah.
Just because he's like, oh my god, why'd you ruin everything?
Well, they had beef beforehand too, and then the beef just intensifies after you saved me from an airplane exploding. I hate you for some reason.
Yeah, it felt unnatural, the amount of confrontations he was trying to spur and just trying to fight. It just felt like it was like, we need drama conflict here, have him antagonize him.
He's just an asshole.
And it just it was just like, okay, like every time he walked on scene, I'm like, okay, he's clearly just going to be an asshole.
Right.
Like, that's his whole thing or whatever. Um, so I just felt like anytime his character came on screen, I'm like, okay, he's just going to be an ass.
Here's this
Okay.
douchebag.
And it just, it didn't even feel like over the top, like ridiculous. It just felt like he was just being an asshole, like just, out of the blue, just trying to antagonize him
Just
any
'cause
single
that was
way.
his character. Like, that's it. He seems like he was pulled out of like an 80s slasher movie. He's just like, fuck you, kid. And then the rest are like, guys, just calm down.
Yeah, it sucked. Like, I'm just gonna be straight up honest. There's nothing to say about his character except that's just his role and everything. And moving on to one of the other top listings is Valerie Luton, played by Kristen Cloak, who is one of the teachers.
The teacher.
Yeah, which we couldn't fucking tell because she looks exactly the same age as the students.
Yeah.
Because casting.
Yeah, she's probably like 30.
Yeah, and I felt like with her character, they had inklings of like something interesting because she has a lot of remorse because whenever it came to like who should get on the plane and everything and they're talking, she's like, you know what, you go on the plane, I think you'll be a bigger asset than me, I'll just catch you on the next flight or whatever. And just having sort of survivor guilt directly and feeling like she sent someone to their death. Too bad they just kind of drop that a bit, but then kind of drag it back out to be like, oh yeah, she's just really feeling bad about it.
Yeah,
it just...
I kind of understood it. I could have used a little more air to breathe, but I get why they did with her character what they did with it. I think that was an interesting angle to explore. Well, I don't even know. Interesting might be too heavy of a word there.
Yeah.
The way it was executed was, it was kind of like, I don't know. It was like, okay, I get it, but it didn't, it's not something I'm going to remember about this film in 6 months.
Yeah, it's just pretty weak overall. And like I said, I know with horror films, they're just adding numbers, just to have more death scenes and everything.
You gotta get from one death to the next. That's the challenge of writing a horror movie, I think.
Yeah,
what happens in between.
It's just always kind of unfortunate whenever I feel like, whenever it comes to characters, it's just like, okay. And because it is a much slower paced film and everything else like that, you have to spend a lot of time with these characters. And if they're not well developed and everything, it just kind of makes it like, okay, we're just mulling around. We're having the loading time.
Especially since, and maybe minor spoilers, I don't know. As the plot develops, the main character starts to notice like a pattern. And that pattern is a really interesting structure for how to write the script because it sets up expectations for the audience. But I think how that works better is if you care about these characters. You know what I mean? So I think the weak characterization kind of fell flat against what was I think a pretty good idea for writing a script that gives a structure for what's happening for the kills, but then the characters can sort of try to subvert expectations, so you have that conflict with the audience, so like what's going to happen next, but by that point we hadn't really had the pattern super solidified yet, and by the time we get to that point, I don't think I cared about any of the remaining characters that much.
No.
So it doesn't quite deliver on the same if you like have that sort of pattern, and then it's like, wait, where's my favorite character on the pattern? He's going to die next. He's going to die in two deaths from that one. But if you just don't really care about any of them at all, then kind of makes it feel a little slower.
Yeah, because like that's the thing, unfortunately, right? It's just you just kind of waiting around and just kind of like, okay, I don't really care about these characters. At the very least, is there going to be like a cool creative like killing scene and everything, which I feel like a good horror film should like those should be the highlights for sure, but I feel like the in between should still be palatable and enjoyable, like
right,
just kind of to stave you over until you get to that moment. But again, if they're not really giving you too much, not that I feel like it ever wastes time or whatever, it just feels like the overall investment I had was kind of middling.
They tried to pace it pretty well, like by screen time numbers, but it's just some of those lulls in between could feel like a lull. Despite the fact that they were moving things along, it was just like, if you're not that interested in the people saying it, or it can be like, okay, let's go.
So Yeah, again, we've trailed off from talking about characters. I think that's just going to be the trend. We're going to talk about more interesting aspects than
because
the characters.
there are some pretty interesting aspects about this movie. There's stuff that I like about it that I want to praise. But I do think, the characters are probably one of the weaker points.
Yeah, we'll try to power through these and everything. One of the next students that's there is Todd Wagner, played by Chad Donella, who is literally great value wingman. Like, no matter what, like, think of any wingman from any TV show, movie, dilute it down, and boom, you got it. He's like the guy always having the main character's back and everything. You know, he's the one who's like, let's take a shit together. And he's like, oh, come on, you know, gotta get with these chicks and everything. Whoa. Or do something like that. It just...
He's that guy, the best friend.
Yes, exactly. Literally the best friend. And to be fair to Chad, I don't feel like he does a bad job at all. No, I feel like he does a serviceable job.
He's got some character,
yeah, for sure. But again, it just, whenever it comes to actual character depth wise, they're just, that's all there is to it. But overall, well performed. One performance I'm on the fence about and everything is done by a relatively bigger name, Sean William Scott, who plays Billy Hitchcock and everything. He's kind of like just the dopey guy, always getting into a wreck on his bike and everything.
He's very dopey.
And I feel like it's one of those things. It was on the cusp of like, there was a good idea of a character here. I just feel like the pieces aren't assembled. Like, it's in the Ziploc bag. It just needed to be assembled. And I felt like overall his performance was like, usually like, there was room, like I wish there would have been maybe a couple more takes with him or something, because obviously I've seen him act in other stuff and I know he has acting chops and everything, but this, I just felt like he just always is kind of like confused or whatever, which I know is intrinsically his character, but it genuinely felt like Sean was actually literally confused as an actor. Like, how am I supposed to be in this scene?
Right, it ended up feeling one note a little bit after a while, because every scene he's in, he's just like, what do you mean? What's going on?
yeah, doing that. Literally, you did it perfectly there, Aaron. Perfectly capturing him. But so I feel like it's just like, oh man, there was it
because I do like what they have, but there's not a lot of range to that character. That it kind of falls flat for me.
Yes, like there was good bits and pieces there that just wasn't assembled correctly to build a cohesive character.
Yeah,
because I think like if they had just refined it, and I want to. Not that I want to blame this, but I was almost curious, like, if it's more directing or anything else like that.
Perhaps.
That I feel like it's a little underbaked. I feel like the recipe is there and everything, just should have been a little bit more. But, I mean, overall, if I was to rate performance, I definitely would say it's at least just like a sliver above the rest. Yeah, and everything. So that's my thoughts. And then I know this one's going to be quick. Amanda Detmer, who plays Terry Chaney, who's literally just supposed to be the girlfriend of the asshole, trying to defuse situations. Well, that is it.
That's her old character.
I'm not joking. This is no diss to the actress at all whatsoever. It is nothing. There is nothing there.
And I think that one's just the writing department. That's all they gave her character, so that's all it ended up being. But.
Yeah, and I would say there's probably about 3 more characters worth mentioning. Obviously, 2 of the like FBI agents going in, Agent Ween and Agent Shrek, played by Daniel Roebuck and Roger Guenver. Oh gosh, how the hell? Roger Guenver Smith?
Oh.
Roger Smith. Anyways.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes, Roger G. Smith. And I felt like they were just there to be another antagonistic force of like, oh, not only do you have death coming after you, but now you have the police and everything.
The FBI.
Yes, doing that. And I felt like overall, like, I think like it's one of those things they thought that what they wrote as banter between them, like, oh yeah, this is super funny, snarky, stuff like that.
But it wasn't that funny.
It really wasn't that funny, and I would say it's not the actors' fault, because I feel like the actors themselves were delivering the lines the best they could. It's just the lines intrinsically weren't that funny. There was one time where I laughed a little bit close, and it was like, for a second there, I kind of believed him, Like, and it was that ad scene, but even then, that was just kind of like a, like just barely anything.
You just registered.
And probably to the surprise of absolutely nobody, the performance, I was definitely like, oh yeah, I'm enjoying every bit of this, is Tony Todd, who plays, as the credits say, Bloodworth.
Bloodworth.
Yeah,
The mortician.
Yes, the mortician and everything. But I mean, obviously, we've raved on about Tony Todd on this podcast with him as Candyman and everything. And I mean, he's great. You could tell he's just relishing in the role and just kind of having fun with it, which I think definitely helps to make it more memorable. But spoiler alert, you only really don't get to see him too much. In fact, the one time you do see him, that's like, yeah. So that was kind of a letdown.
It's like a cameo almost.
Yeah, which I don't know. It's like one of those things. Again, like I understand the idea of just having Death be there and not really wanting to put a face to it or whatever. And they never confirmed it was actually Death, but. I don't know if it's one of those things where they were like, oh yeah, this guy is Death, or they were just trying to make him creepy. Then later on, they confirm he's Death, or one of those things. But I mean, it definitely is like one of the best scenes in the film and everything. But that's because Tony Todd's a really good actor, and everything, and just relishes on every syllable he is speaking and everything, and he's like, I'll see you soon. Doing that, like, it's just
there's a lot of dialogue like that too, where it kind of like implies that you're going to die. People like to say shit like, I'm gonna drop dead or whatever. Like,
oh my god, yes.
Or just like I'm finished. all these sorts of like, double entendres, I suppose, that could also mean dying, and then they die. The movie loves that sort of like symbolism and foreshadowing. So he got a lot of lines like that, and I love that. That's the one he says whenever they leave, like, I'll see you soon, which is when you're a mortician,
Yes, and that's also that's good.
Right.
There's a lot of meaning. So I mean, I felt like there's like good ideas, which is probably why this was able to spawn off into a franchise. It makes me curious for future films if it's going to be one of those things that if one of the future films is like, you know what, I actually like this film better than the first one. Because obviously a lot of the deaths we hear about, I imagine, are probably from later films, considering the ones I have heard about, none of them appeared in this film.
True.
And
I wonder, because a lot of this movie by necessity has to focus on like the concept itself, because it's such an abstract thing. You can't you can make like a Friday the 13th movie and never really explain Jason's backstory if you don't want to. Because like we get it, there's a guy, he's killing people. But like, this one you just have to explain death in the because that's the whole concept. But I wonder if in the later ones, now that they kind of got that out of the way, if they can have a little more fun with the coincidences.
Yeah, I'm very curious, and that's always a tricky thing is whenever movies try to establish universe rules and everything on like how death functions and everything, and of course, like in the film they have like theory crafting as to like, oh, I was looking here and I believe this is what happens. But towards the end of the film, the theory gets like...
it gets a little muddy.
And everything. I wouldn't say it's like completely ruined, but it's definitely like, okay, what does this mean?
It does make sense in universe too, because they haven't like, even by the end of the movie, I guess they're still figuring things out is what I'll say. They're always, through the whole movie, they're constantly trying to figure out what more about this pattern.
So that would be another thing where I'm like, I appreciate them trying to establish like some sort of like morals or rules that death would follow in this instance or anything else like that. At the same point, though, I do feel like the commitment to it is lacking a tiny bit. But and I guess one thing we can talk about is with the most notorious thing about this film franchise being deaths and everything. Overall, how would you say the deaths in this film were?
I think they were largely carried by the concept. Because when you consider the concept behind these sort of accidental deaths, they become a little more interesting. I think honestly, by the end of it, I was starting to get tired of the Rube Goldberg-ass machine ways that people... Which makes sense in universe, because it's like, you've already set on a path. Whatever decisions you make have already led to a series of events that are going to eventually hit your death or whatever. So that's what they try to, like, portray through some of these death sequences. And some of them were so much more entertaining than others, though, is what I'll say. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely, like, it would go from, like, being believable to, like, okay, this is
Wacky,
just
yeah.
wacky Looney Tunes sort of trap contraption sort of death going on and everything, which, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed or whatever, but it definitely was a bit jarring just to kind of see how ludicrously it played out and everything. And it's funny too, because you would think, like, with it being the first one, it would be more mundane, more grounded, more believable, but straight from the get-go they have a couple of death scenes that's just like, wow.
Wowzer.
Yeah, was not expecting it to go that way, but
Yeah. I won't.
here we
I
are.
won't go into detail about it, but the teacher's death scene is my.
Oh my god!
That one was my favorite wacky series.
That was the only one that just played in my head repeatedly, where I'm just like, good lord, I just need like Looney Tunes music, like like going on, like it was just unhinged craziness. But I didn't hate it, but yeah, it. Sorry, I'm just thinking about some stuff about it that's just making me giggle about it. That's definitely gonna have to be dissected and everything. But
God, the knives.
Oh god.
The vodka, all of it is
just yes, it was a whole freaking mousetrap series of events and everything. Oh my gosh. Man, aside from that, is there anything you want to talk about before getting into spoilers? I feel like we've got... Yeah, okay,
I
that's
want
what
to
I
talk
figured.
about spoilers.
Okay, well, give your rating first then. Come on.
I give Final Destination 1 destination out of 2. So it's I'll round up. It's like a 6 out of 10 for me. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
like a 6 out of 10 movie. I think the concept's pretty strong and carries a lot of the intrigue in this movie. But I also thought the script writing, though it might be a little corny, I really actually appreciate a lot of in the cinematography and the little finer details in the background. I mean, even right from the beginning, you could spot like this guy's room's full of posters and it says like perseverance on the background, and like just like little hints as to what the themes of the movie are going to be. I think it's really rich in those sort of details, which I appreciate. I think, dialogue's all right. Some of it falls flat, but I think really it's the concept and the execution of some of these kills and stuff that really carry something special. I see its influence in other works. I mean, I just got done watching Lost, and there's a whole season that just steals this concept where this guy was supposed to die, and then he hasn't yet, so this other guy can see the future that he's gonna fucking die over. It's like, I'm like, wow, they took that from Final Destination. That's cool. I realize now. So like it's I understand. Yeah, like I think it's a pretty cool concept. I see how they've spun off several after this. It's a sort of freaky ways to think about it. It's a way to make horror out of the most common cause of death at home, just the freak accidents happen all the time. You don't think about when you plug in your toaster and drop it in your bathtub, oopsie doopsie or whatever. So yeah, it's like a 6 out of 10. I think we've talked extensively about the weaknesses points, I think, in my mind, being the characters, some of the meandering script options that they chose. But overall, I thought it was entertaining in concept and executed enough that it's like a 6 out of 10 for me.
Okay, yeah, that's definitely more generous than what I'm gonna be.
Yeah.
It's, I don't know, it's one of those things that, like, even if a film is like bad critically, if I'm able to find any sort of semblance I can just really enjoy or whatever, that for me just helps make the experience worthwhile for me personally there. This film is just, it was wavering towards the beginning because I was thinking like, yeah, this is like 6 out of 10. And then as it just kind of continued on, it was just like,
yeah,
okay, moving.
My score definitely did go down over time.
Going down to a 5, dipped to a 4, kind of went back up and everything. So I feel like ultimately this is going to probably get like a soft 5 from me.
Okay.
tentatively. I feel like I thought about moving it down to 4.5. 4 feels way too critical of it and everything. I do feel like there is a lot of interesting stuff. So it's like one of those things where I'm like, because of like obviously it being such a unique idea and everything else, it does help it and everything, but there's a lot of stuff like, you know, the characters, like I'm not gonna remember anybody from this, not at all whatsoever, besides Tony Todd, of course, and then Sean William Scott, just because it's like, oh, that Sean William Scott was in this film, and that's it. And the fact that I felt like the deaths, definitely I felt like they were super creative, and the campiness does help it and everything, but it's also just the in-between of the deaths where they're just kind of talking and stuff where I feel like I'm not really getting too much value. It's moving the story and everything else, so I see that value, so it's not like, oh my god, I'm done. So I don't know, it's very much a soft generous 5 from me where I'm at. I'm pretty like middling of like,
that's what I have on my Tinder profile.
Yeah.
I can give you a soft generous 5. Sorry, I broke Coale there.
It's okay. I'm putting myself back
he's
in.
recovering.
Let's just talk about spoilers. I'm done. Yeah. I can't even be mad. I just literally I set up the trap. I set the things in motion to my own internal death. Talk about the first spoiler, bud.
Man, I want to talk about the plane, but we already talked about that.
I mean, you could talk a little bit more about it. Just do a little bit more sprinkling if there's anything else, like just the fact of how hysterically horrific it was.
I will say it is actually one of the few instances that I don't feel completely like gypped by like a dream sequence, and then you wake up from it, you know.
That's true, because it does make sense universe.
Yes, but it did at first. We were like, oh brother, you know, when they show the whole plane exploding and his like face getting fried with the exploding, he's like, ah! And then he like wakes up and it cuts back to the sequence they just were, where the two girls are like, can you please switch? Like immediately my reaction to that was like, oh fuck that, you know. But then as soon as he switches the seats and he goes and grabs the tray table thing and the little pin comes out just like it did in his dream, and it like sort of confirms to him that this thing he saw was like gonna happen, and he starts flipping out. I was like, oh, I get it now. And then it really sets in motion. So I do appreciate that, because usually, I hate that shit whenever something happens and actually it was a dream in a horror movie. But this is like the one time where it's almost like and putting that right at the beginning, I don't actually give them a lot of credit for. It's almost like, ooh, like we're reinventing this thing that was shitty. But now it's kind of cool, right? Because it's the whole concept of the film.
Yeah,
he can see what's about to happen.
Yeah, because I do think that you raise a good point that it was just a dream sequence and everything is a very hard trope to pull off effectively without feeling like it's an absolute ripoff and everything else like that. Because, we've seen it even with like movies that I've loved, like, Friday the 13th, literally they pull that and everything else. And a lot of films have a hard time justifying like it, besides the fact that they just want to shock the audience. I feel like it's just sort of cheap, like sort of shock the audience, like, oh my god, this happened. And just kidding. But you are right in the fact that there is like an actual narrative reason why this happens at the very least, and it also helps set off the events of the film. It's because he had that premonition, that dream and everything else, that he's like, I feel like this is going to happen. And not only that, like, it'd be one thing if he's like, I had that dream, I had to get off the plane, but the fact that he went through the same steps of like, yeah, sure, have the seats, I go up, I pull the pin, the thing drops, and it's like, fuck this,
right?
Like, if I had that happen and everything, I would be hard-pressed to not freak out like he would and everything, which is nice to make it believable. Now, everybody getting off the plane and everything else definitely felt a little, like, too convenient, because usually they would just break off the two problematic people at the very least. Like, the best friend following him, sure. The girlfriend following her boyfriend, sure. But, and I know they mentioned with the one, love interest, she's like, I just believed you in that moment. I just followed you off.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have fucking Sean William Scott who just wanders off.
Yeah, he's the
Just
one
cause.
Well, yeah, he was apparently in the bathroom or whatever. There's a scene whenever they're coming off, he's trying to get back on the plane. He's like, I was just taking a shit, man. Like, whatever. So, yeah, that was his thing.
Okay,
He was just a dopey guy that was gonna probably miss the flight anyways, because he's like, I just gotta get back on the plane. But
yeah, because they were looking for him, right, and everything.
Yeah.
So that does make sense. I'm glad you caught on to that, because I missed it. I was just like, it was just a lot of commotion going on, but... Yeah, overall, it is funny seeing that plane happen at the very least, and it's so funny how they have like this added drama of like, main character's best friend's dad doesn't want them hanging out because he lost his brother on the flight.
Oh, yeah.
Or whatever, that weird thing, just so they weren't in contact with each other. But I do like how they do set it up that the brother was also on the flight that died, because with the very first death that happens with Todd and everything is that he accidentally hangs himself with a clothesline in the bathroom.
Yeah, he like slips on some shit. And then the liquid seeps back into the toilet. A lot of toilet stuff.
Which is funny because, like, this is the very first death in the film. They psyched us out multiple times, and even just having the premonition of death, they acted as if we've seen a Final Destination film before, with how much they were amping it
Which
up.
is why I love it. This film doesn't treat the audience like it's stupid. I feel like a lot of movies in general do, but, horror movies too. But this one is like, okay, they set up the concept, and then they know you're already thinking about, okay, well, what's he gonna die? And so they show him like shaving, and then he actually cuts himself a little bit with the shit, but then he puts that down, and then he gets the nose clippers and puts it in his nose, and you're like, oh, we were wincing, and we're like, oh god, like those are gonna go into his brain somehow, or what? And then the radio that has a little shock to it, and as this water pulls out, it's like it builds a lot of tension just because they know what's up, and that's where the tension comes from. So I actually give some of the writing in that respect like a lot of credit.
Yeah, because I think definitely one of the things that does deter from a film is if you could just see what's happening a mile away about to occur, because you're like, yep, it's gonna happen, and oh wow, it happened. But this, genuinely, I did not expect the first death to... I knew the death was happening and stuff, and obviously they make it clear with like the wind blowing and unnatural things like the toilet leaking and the water just moving towards him and everything in an unnatural way. Like, death is arriving for him and everything, and they don't linger away from him being choked out and everything.
No.
They definitely linger on it for a while, showing his eyes get bloodshot and everything.
Showing how he tries to escape it, but he's all slippery because of the liquid that he's
Yes, like, it's literally, like, so much, like, they explain, like, the soap spilled, and so that's not be able to create traction in order to pull or whatever, so he's just stuck there, wriggling, and then the doors closed and everything else like that. And then, of course, the best friend only knows, because whenever he throws a newspaper at the wall, the fan cuts it up and he sees the word Todd, which was cut off from Today.
He throws a Playboy magazine.
Oh my gosh, the only
boobies.
set of boobies.
Yeah,
yes.
I know. I feel like they had to slip some boobies into the horror movie, but then they didn't want to show any like actual cast boobies, so they just had to open boobies in a Playboy.
No.
And he freaks out about something, and he throws the magazine at the window, and it gets caught in that fan that they kept on showing over and over and over again. And it cuts up, and it says Todd, a little piece of paper that he gets. Todd.
Which I do have to give credit. There is, like, they clearly set up a love interest between Clear and Alex and everything else as it continues on. But spoiler alerts, obviously we're in spoiler section. I'm surprised they never have sex or even kiss.
Yeah,
that was
really none of
very
that.
surprising.
Even at the end, whenever they do a time skip and they're together, there's no they just kind of hold hands for a second. It just implies they're together, but then they're not. There's not that latent sexualization that's in most horror movies.
Yeah, which was surprising, and in all honesty, I was like, okay,
yeah.
Neat,
refreshing.
Because I feel like if they just would do it, it's like, okay, here we go again, and everything.
Yeah, because sometimes whenever the boobies are in the horror movie, it's like, well, they already have the R rating and they need to get some butts and seats, so there's going to be boobies in this movie. But I feel like, honestly, that starts to change in part around this time period because I do think audiences have actually gotten more conservative over time. Whenever you talk to like movie audience, when they do surveys and stuff, like kids don't want, like teens these days don't want boobies in their movies because they're like, this is awkward to watch with my parents or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, part of it's that, but I also think it's just because like internet porn exists. So
Yeah.
you don't really need the promise of breasts to fill seats in movies. Not that it doesn't still continue to fill seats in movies to this day. But
Yeah, but no, I think you raise a good, valid point there and everything.
there's my academic analysis of boobs in movies.
There we go. Look at
what
that
my
go.
thesis is going to be on.
Oh my gosh. But yeah, that first death happening in the movie, I was genuinely surprised that I was like, okay, it was disturbing. It was creative. It was something I was not expecting. And so it's just like, you know.
They subvert your expectations a little while not like cheapening on the own rules that they've already set up for the film.
But the next death that they end up having was definitely one of those things that Aaron and I saw coming a mile away. Like, as soon as they had a premonition of a bus, it's like, okay, one of these people are being bussed.
Right, where's the bus?
And so they're, of course, and it's funny because they're all meeting up again as one of them dies and everything. And so basically it's all kicked off just because asshole McGee wants to start a fight with main guy and everything. And then whenever his girlfriend tries to break it up and is just getting frustrated, she's like, I am finished with this or whatever. She's standing out in the street and then boom, gets hit by a bus. And it's funny with how quick it is and how just quiet they make it.
Right.
Like the and blood spurts, and
spatter on all of them.
they're just there standing in the wake of it.
Right.
And the teacher's literally at this point like,
I'm
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm dumb.
I'm dumb.
I'm done. I'm done. No.
That's Billy's character.
And so there's nothing much to say about it, but I didn't feel like it was a cheap death. It was just like it was a safe death.
It was a death appropriate to the magnitude of that character. They were like, she had like 3 lines, and so she gets like a 3-second bus kill scene.
Which then leads us to the third kill that happens with Valerie, which is the most Pee Wee Herman breakfast machine ass death I've seen. Just because like you know it's already like getting weird, which I do love the fact that like basically with Alex seeing everybody die and everything else like that, he is determined to be like, I need to try to prevent it. But he's making it look like he's part of it because he's always at the scene. And the one with him like going to the teacher's house, I get it, I understand, but it's just so laughably comedic. Him just hanging around, be like, "Oh, I'm checking the time." As FBI people pull him aside.
Yeah, he's like lurking outside her house to like because he figured out the pattern, right? The news pops up, and he's like, "Wait a minute!" Then the explosion explains like what the track that the electrical explosion took in the plane or whatever, and he notices like, wait, like the order that this electric explosion happened has been killing us in the same order that we've actually died, so far with the 2 deaths that we have. So he's like, if this theory's correct, then the teacher's supposed to be next. He goes to his house to try to like, just in a panic to figure out how to prevent, he's like, make sure the tires are all aired up or whatever. But I do love that this is how good characterization happens or whatever. We've characterized the teacher as just paranoid and needing to get the fuck out of here. And so she sees this kid that she's already like, which is a weird thing to say to this kid at the funeral, but she's like, you freak me out or whatever. Like she's like she doesn't understand how he premonitioned the flight exploding and she didn't want anything to do with him. So as soon as he sees her lurking outside his window, she's like, fuck, FBI.
Yeah.
Come get him.
Realistically,
yeah. But I do think that was good script writing for them to, and then pick him up and be interrogating him, and they're like, listen, like we don't have anything to book you on, but it is weird that you're at the scene of all these deaths, like what you're like what. And he's like, I gotta get out of here or she's gonna die. And then, of course, it's a little too late for the teacher.
Yeah, it's been set in motion, which I'm trying to remember exactly just a way to describe it. So she's listening to her John Denver records as she's moving stuff around.
I was really expecting them to play Leaving on an Airplane.
Oh my gosh, that would have been so
But
good.
they didn't. I was waiting for it, but they didn't put that one on.
Yeah, no, they just played good old John Denver. She's basically making herself some tea and everything and she had cleaned up some of the drips with a little towel that she places over the knife block and everything. And whenever she pours the tea in the mug and she takes a sip, she freaks out because it says high school on the mug and everything, like the name of the high school, and she's not trying to think about it. And so she pours it out and she's like, I'm going to need something stronger, and then breaks out a couple of ice cubes and vodka. Now, due to the fact that something was incredibly hot in the mug and going straight to cold, it causes the mug to crack and everything. And as she's walking through with her like mug full of vodka, it's dripping along from the stove to the computer room, which she already had issues whenever she lit the stove and everything, having to use matches and everything to light it.
A little bit of gas leak in there, probably.
Yeah, a little bit of a gas leak for sure. And then she goes to the computer trying to lean over to get something. The vodka is dripping into the computer and everything.
Hits the motherboard.
Hits the motherboard and everything. And as it's smoking, she goes up to investigate it. The computer monitor explodes, sending glass shards into her neck.
Yeah.
And as she's trying to pull it out and everything, she's trying to stumble over to the kitchen just to try to find something to help it out. But in the meanwhile, the computer has sparked and is causing a flame following the vodka trail that she had.
All the way back into the kitchen where she just wandered into.
Yes, as she's wandering into and everything. And then the stove starts to catch a blaze and everything else like that. And I think she's trying to put out the fire.
Yeah, but and then there's like the oven explodes or some shit.
Yeah,
there's like a burst that knocks her to the floor.
Something happens.
Yeah, she's trying. I know she's on because she ends up on the ground and she's reaching for the towel that she put over the knives to like stop the bleeding around her neck or whatever. Yes. But that's when she pulls down the whole knife rack. Knife falls into her chest, and by this point, the main character has arrived, has noticed something's going wrong in the house and has broken in and sees everything on fire and her laying on the ground with a knife on her chest and blood all around her throat.
And my favorite part is like I knew exactly like his fingerprints are going to get there. I was not expecting him trying to grab the knife and everything to pull out.
Instead of like calling 911 or whatever, he like tries to put out the fire, but then there's another explosion and the chair falls on the knife and like pushes it in further, you know?
Yeah.
So he decides I better get the knife out, you know, but then he just pulls the knife out and she dies and he's like standing in her blood.
And like leaves a footprint and he's running out. Meanwhile, Sean William Scott is outside riding his bike as he normally is.
They just, convene for whatever reason.
And then I thought that was just going to be it. It's just seeing Alex leaving the building, you know, or whatever at the scene of crime. No, the house has to explode. Yep. It has to. And he does like the little like kick flip.
Yeah, the action hero jump as the explosion happens in the background.
It's just so goofy, over the top.
Yeah.
I was like losing my marbles at what I had just witnessed, and even trying to describe it is
you sound like Charlie Day in fucking Always Sunny talking about the mailroom, you know.
Yeah, Pepe Sylvia.
So he's been getting mail address, you know. just the convoluted chain of events that happens. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! But it also obviously that's what we're going to remember is the goofy ass death that occurred and everything. And
that one was my favorite one.
I mean,
because it was like the most convoluted yet, and then I feel like all the ones afterwards are just like pale,
a little benign, and they do have ones that are over the top, but it just doesn't reach the level of ludicrousy of that and everything. I would argue, because the next death that ends up happening, which, if you've noticed a trend, we're just talking about deaths because literally any in between you could think about is the most generic fill-in.
It's not that entertaining. We'll tell you the relevant details.
Yes. Moving on to the next death, which I do like, is the fact that basically Clear's able to convince the remaining people, which is herself, Alex, Carter the asshole, and Billy, Sean William Scott, let's just be real, all together in a car and everything, and they're like, how come you were hanging outside her house and everything? He's like, I think there's a pattern to how we're being attacked and everything, and he's trying to theorize it and everything. And Carter is getting scared, and at this point he's like, no, I control whether I live or I die.
Because he figures out that he's next, because the main character doesn't tell him, but he's like, you're not telling me, because I'm next.
Yeah. And so he has this idea of like, I'm just gonna go out on my own terms,
Right.
like, fuck you, death. And he's driving like a maniac,
Yeah.
and then he decides to park on the train tracks and everything. And then once everyone's like, you're crazy, I'm getting out of the car or whatever, he decides to stay there until he realizes, oh wait, I don't want to die.
Right. Well, he says that I think it's still a control thing for him too, because he sit there and he goes, "Today's not my day to die," and then he like goes to turn the car keys, but then the car won't start.
Yes, he's trying to prove he could avoid death.
Right. So then he's like,
Yes.
"Oh shit!" And then and then his seatbelt gets stuck, and the car door is locked, and he's like, "Oh fuck, I can't get out."
Yeah, and doing that, and you think that's going to be it and everything, but alas, Alex is able to save Carter from the car. Car gets demolished by the train and everything, and Sean William Scott is freaking out. He's like, I am done with this. And as soon as he started talking, I was like, okay, clearly he's the one that's going to die next. And lo and behold, a piece of debris from underneath the track gets caught up in the train, literally just flies across the screen to cut his head in half. Yeah. It just left the bottom part of his jaw and everything, just does that. And so it was like, yeah, okay, well, that was cut and clean. Definitely, I saw what was going to happen a mile away, but at that point, I wasn't mad at the film or whatever. It was just like...
But the crucial in-universe lore that it established at that point is that it will skip over. If you save the life of somebody that's going to die, then it skips to the next person. That's what they figured out from that scene, because Billy was next in line.
And so that was like the weird thing is the fact that Billy was next in line, and then as they figure out and everything, Alex is the one that's supposed to be next
after Billy
and everything. So his whole idea is to have Clear take him to a remote section, and he's doing like, I don't know, like I think it's one of those things that I'm like, okay, I saw this coming, but at the same point seeing it play out about how careful he's being about everything was still funny. Like it's definitely one of those things like, okay, yeah, I could see this coming and everything.
They just give you a glimpse, but it's like enough, of him like duct taping everything into the walls and everything.
Yeah, and literally just like, wearing gloves, opening a can, and just carefully trying to eat. Which Aaron had made the funny observation that he's trying to safety proof everything, but he's still carrying around a gas light lantern.
It didn't come into play at all, but it was so funny because in the middle of the safety proof thing, he's like lighting this old gas lantern, and I'm like, that's what I would be afraid of, not taping some statuette to the wall. But
and of course, it is funny because you do get glimpses of death trying to kill him and everything, like whenever it has the trash fall over and cause
over the fishing pole, which catches onto the door, which then opens, and there's like a knife on the other side.
Yes, and I love that the knife like tries to poke through, and whenever he's digging through, he sees like a dirty hook. He's like, tetanus.
Yeah,
just doing something like that. It's just dumb and goofy, but I appreciate it.
I do too, because he's full schizo mode, but it's warranted. Yeah.
But it is interesting because, again, I guess because he saved himself from death, it skipped over him and went to...
Well, this is kind of... I feel like they really loosely played this part together. He, like, looks at the thing again, and he was like, wait, I switched seats, which means the next person... But because if I didn't switch... He was thinking initially it was him next because he switched seats, but he was like, no... If I didn't switch seats, then it would have been Clear next or something. I don't. He has some bullshit explanation about the switching seats is actually changed the order of things.
Yeah.
So he runs to go save Clear.
And Clear, of course, is like hanging out in her home and everything, and then sees like, her dog's in trouble as like a power line is falling down and it's like whipping, it's electric, and she's trying to rescue him, and the thing's still whipping around trying to impale her with like a little clothesline, merry-go-round thing, and then the pool starts spilling out, and so then the water starts electrocuting it. She's climbing up the side paneling and everything, about to fall off. She goes in the house, everything's exploding and everything. Like, that was over the top, but it wasn't so hysterical like the teacher death. It was just like the usual end of the horror movie climax.
Right.
And as she's trying to get out of the car and everything, Alex is able to meet up while FBI is pursuing him and everything because they found out where he was. And then he's like, you can't do anything. let me be the one to set it in motion and save you.
Mm-hmm.
And so then he ends up sacrificing his life by grabbing the power line that's whipping around and everything, gets electrocuted, sent back, and then everything calms down, and then it cuts forward to show all three of them heading off to Paris.
Yeah, because the FBI agents pull up on scene when he does this, and they run to his recently electrocuted body, and one of them says he's still breathing. It starts doing chest compressions as they fade out. So it's assumed that, like, he saved her life, therefore it skips past her, and then the FBI, like, saved them or whatever. So, like, he's in the clear because the FBI wouldn't have normally been there for death or whatever. But cut to the end scene or whatever, and it turns out I feel like he did his calculations wrong.
Yeah.
Because he's still worried, and his other two friends are like, bro, stop worrying about this shit. Like, we beat death. You're going to be fine. You're going to live a full, healthy life. But he's like, what if I am next, actually? Because it was, because if he had switched seats or whatever, then Clear would have been next, and he would be after Clear.
Yeah. It's just a weird thing. And then, of course, they do the psych out where, I mean, I'm pretty sure I saw this coming as well as you did, where, like, they're not living.
Right.
Yeah.
They started showing all the numbers and stuff again in the background. There's a lot of 180. They were on, like, 81 Street and whatever. But then there was the big old sign that for some reason said 180 in big lights.
Yeah. And so, like, it's after the revelation of, like, oh, should it happen to you next? Should it happen to you next? And they have, like, a billion psych out deaths, like, where Alex is almost hit by a bus.
Yeah, well, the bus is the important. The bus was supposed to do it, right? But I get the cool thing that they set up here is that Clear is the one that has the premonition this time.
Oh,
so it's sort of passed the premonition to her, because she was the one that sees the reflection of the bus in the window, which was like, kind of harkens back to him seeing the reflection of the bus in the window when that other chick died earlier in the movie. So she sees it, and she saves him by yelling Alex when he stops, like right before the bus whizzes by that would have hit him. And then, all that other shit starts happening to try to kill him. But...
Yeah, and then, like, it was such a crazy turn of events, but everything's trying to kill everybody and everything else. And then, of course, it cuts to black as it shows Carter about to get hit by the sign as he's talking to them. And then it just cuts to credits. So... Yeah, it's weird because I'm so used to dissecting more as of late with a lot more of these movies, but this one's pretty clean cut and dry whenever it comes to
because it's like,
about
they're
it.
Still destined for death, I guess, and then that's the end of it. But...
Yeah, and I don't know, it feels very anticlimactic not to feel like I have a big final finishing thought or anything else like that, but genuinely it's just kind of like, yeah, okay, you know, like, I don't know.
That's how I felt too. I wasn't leaving that movie theater going, oh, fuck.
Yeah. It was just like,
it's just like, oh, okay, there's the end.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, the end and everything, which, I mean, isn't bad, because I definitely had some endings where I'm like, the fuck was that?
Right. It's better than, I feel like it's a lot easier to write a bad ending than it is to write a really good one. You know?
But yeah, it does raise a question, like, why this, like, 6-month gap, I guess, which I know they said, like, you never know when death's coming for you.
Right.
But just to, like, take a 6-month break.
It's to give them a false sense of security, I guess.
True. And then there was, like, multiple attempts at death. Just like, oh, this is death here, this is death here, this is death here. And I guess it's just like, death is just going to be relentlessly hunting him down regardless.
I guess.
So I guess it's going to take turns maybe, or maybe not. I don't know. The rules are very
I'm sure they
loose.
They addressed that in Final Destination 2, Electric Boogaloo.
They better. They better. But there's only one way to find out.
Yeah.
Is maybe watching it for a future episode.
I guess so.
Which is not for the next episode.
Not the next episode.
Not the next episode.
What is the next episode?
The next episode is going to be a sequel and everything. I felt like it was time to revisit this franchise because so far it hasn't scared you away. But it is a sequel, and it does have a titular bad guy. one that is fantastical in nature as well.
Okay.
And this is the 4th installment.
Oh, the 4th. Well, we watched 3 that has the character in the title.
Let's see. Oh, sorry. I guess I lied. The main antagonist name is not in the title.
Okay.
That was a lie.
Well,
I realized I used titular incorrectly.
I see. That did throw me off. Is it? No, it's not Halloween, is it?
No, it's not Halloween.
What are we watching for? A Nightmare on Elm Street?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There you go. You did it. Yeah. Anyways, thank you all so much for listening to this episode. We'll see y'all again next time when we're popping the scary with A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Dream Master. Whatever.
Nice.
Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube, Castbox, or iTunes platforms to stay up to date when new episodes drop. To see what Aaron and I are up to, check out our respective Twitter accounts. For me, it is @ColeKirkVA, and for Aaron, it is @AnimalGameDev. Thank you all so much for listening to our podcast. We'll speak to you all again next time when we're popping the scary.